Thank you. I am delighted to introduce Carol Morgan. She is a brilliant and insightful and uplifting woman. She has gone through the tragedy of having her son transition into the next life, and she overcame that by learning how to communicate with him on her own. And she now has been communicating with Mikey, and as a result of that, then she's actually written a book. It is called "A Young Flying High in Spirit: A Young Snowboarder's Account of His Ride Through Heaven." And the byline is Mikey Morgan and Carol Morgan. But she is articulate and she has wonderful things to say about her journey to being able to communicate with Mikey and what she's learned from Mikey that's in the book. And so it's a delight for me to be able to introduce Carol Morgan.
Thanks, Craig. It's nice to be here. So, my name is Carol Morgan, and I'm a regular mom. I was brought up in St. Paul, Minnesota, United States, and I was raised very strict Catholic. That was really all I knew in regards to anything spiritual, was through a very strict Catholic church that I belonged to with my family, with my parents and siblings. I got married, and what I did, go to school. I'm a physical therapist. I want to give you a little background about myself. I'm a physical therapist. I've worked for 37 years in a hospital rehab setting. I love helping people, and it's been a very rewarding profession for me. So my background is actually being raised Catholic and science with what my profession is, which makes this even more, well, what made it crazy for me when this all started to happen. I got married and had I have two beautiful sons. My oldest son is Mikey, and my youngest son is Joey. And we had just a wonderful relationship with our children. And Mikey, he was a very good athlete, and he loved music and the messages that music would give. His love for snowboarding, which he took up in his high school years, brought him out to Colorado State University in Fort Collins for college. He was in the business school there. And during his years of school there, he became involved at a very popular restaurant, bar, club where the college students would go. And he asked the owner, "Oh, can I please try to be the DJ? Can I please try to be the DJ and play some of the songs?" They finally, from being, he worked in the kitchen, he worked in different places of the restaurant, and they let him be a DJ one night. And he ended up progressing to being one of the most favorite DJs out there. And he was known for the songs that he played. His favorite song was Love Generation by Bob Sinclair. And it was about peace, love, and unity. And look to the rainbows and you will see the sun will shine to eternity. And it had such huge messages. It was like he was giving spiritual messages in a accepting way to his classmates and college students out there in Colorado. In the beginning of his junior year, he was on a little mountain trip with some of his friends, and they were up in Poudre Valley in the Rockies, and there was a fluke accident where their Jeep that they were on a trail going about 15 miles an hour, hit a boulder a little bit on one side, and it caused the vehicle to roll. And Mikey was ejected from that vehicle, and he was killed instantly. We were told, of course, the next, that early morning, the policeman, paramedic, and minister came to our door to tell us that Mikey was killed in an accident. I think as a parent, it is the most gut-wrenching, painful thing that can ever happen. My heart ached horribly. I didn't think I could survive without him. Joey, his younger brother too, was so devastated. It was always him and Mikey with everything. But what was really important at this time, I think that is key to my communication ability, was that we were all forgiving. Mikey was a passenger. His good friend was the driver. Even with the wrong information that was given to us initially, we immediately forgave those kids and never blamed anybody for the accident that had him transition. And also never blaming God. I think, sometimes people want to blame somebody when a tragedy happens. We did none of that. We were all forgiving. And I think that is key for connecting, because you don't hang on to that negative energy of holding blame for something that has happened to someone else. Immediately after Mikey's accident, signs began to happen. Now, I had a little bit of an introduction to this when a good friend of mine from high school had passed earlier, where I truly believe things would happen to me where I felt like it was her. Of course, in the Catholic Church, I didn't hear too much about this type of a thing, but it started right away, and it started with music. And I would ask Mikey questions. I would be crying out loud, hollering to the sky as I'm driving or going somewhere. And literally the next song that played on the radio was like he was talking to me. And I thought, this is bizarre. I can't believe it, but I think he's trying to talk to me. And dreams that were so real, I could hold him and he would say, Mom, I'm still here. I'm not really gone. And then I'd get so excited and I'd wake up and I would just break down in tears, because I felt like I had him, but then he vanished and I wanted it to come back. I wanted the dream to come back. I began to journal. I had a good friend who said, Carol, things are gonna happen to you, and Mikey's gonna let you know he's okay, and you should write everything down. And so I did. I started to journal things and write down the songs I heard and the dreams that I had, the dreams that Mikey's dad had, his brother, his friends. People would email me things. I kept everything. I documented everything. I had notebooks and notebooks and notebooks. And people would say to me, oh, that's a coincidence. It's your grief. You got to get over this, that, he's gone and this and that. And I said, no. I said, if I have 8 notebooks of stuff, you can't tell me that what's happening is a coincidence. I know it's my son. So I do want to show you a picture of Mikey. This is Mikey with this famous Minnesota Twins baseball cap that he always wore. Such a great kid, and still is, of course. He helps us all so much. But through my journaling, I began to realize that there was more to this. And so I did, in fact, Craig, I think that's when I met you. I went to a conference in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was there and I was waiting for the conference to start, and I went up to the room, and that's when I actually came across Roberta Grimes too. But that's kind of how my whole connection started with where I am today. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But what happened is I belonged to Compassionate Friends, which is a grief group for parents who had lost children. And I went there, and Mitch Carmody, who now is one of the, I believe he's one of their national speakers, he would talk about whispers of love and signs from your loved ones. And then he would ask for anybody who would like to volunteer to talk about their signs. Well, of course, I'm jumping up and down in the room and everything and saying, oh, I've got something to say, I've got something to say. And so I would get up and tell some of my signs that I felt was truly Mikey trying to communicate with me. Well, he wanted to publish one of those signs in their quarterly magazine. And so I said, sure. So when I went to pick up the magazine, he didn't live too far from me. Right before I got there, he got an email from Sally Baldwin, who was a spiritual medium from Florida, who was recruiting for moms all over the United States for an all expenses paid retreat for her, with her, to see if mothers could communicate with their children, if that would soften their grief. She was a very generous woman, gave her a large sum of money to try to see if this would be helpful. So she recruited. She had, I know, of like 250 inquiries. She took 65 applicants and picked 7 moms in the United States, and I was one of the 7 that she picked. When I went out there to Sun Valley, Idaho, it was a beautiful resort, and she talked to all of us, and I was very fearful because I thought this was against my religion. I was brought up Catholic, and so actually even before I went, I talked with Sister Joan, who was a relative of mine, to see what she thought, if this was okay for me to do this. And she said, you have to go. This is happening to you for a reason. You need to go to this, and there's nothing wrong with mediums. She says, I've even seen John Edwards. So I thought, well, if a Catholic nun went to see John Edwards, I can do this too. So I went to this retreat. Sally Baldwin, when she had me alone, she told me, she said, Carol, Mikey brought you here. He bothered me and pestered me to pick you. She said, you have to understand that the fact that you were all forgiving, and she said that you never blamed anybody, and you have this connection with Mikey. She says, you have the ability to communicate with him, and I'm going to show you how. And I looked at her and I said, you are crazy. You are out of your mind. There is no way I can communicate with my son. I said, I know the signs are real, but I don't think that's possible. And she says, you will see. By the time you leave this weekend, I will show you, you will be able to communicate with Mikey. And I thought she was crazy, but I can. So what happened was and I think what it was for me was seeing was believing. So she showed me how to use a pendulum. And I thought that was kind of voodoo-ish or whatever, and I didn't know what to think about that. But there were times when I thought I heard him in my head, but I thought it was my imagination. I felt that it must be my grief. I must be just thinking I'm hearing him. And so that's what it is. But I actually really was hearing him some telepathically. So with the pendulum, though, I could see it move. And so it moved immediately and very, very precisely. She told me that Mikey was of high energy and this was going to work for me. And she says, you have this connection. And so it was crazy for me to watch this thing move around. And she had given me a little letter disc, which looks like this. It's kind of a wheel. And I used that, and Mikey would spell things by how he moved the pendulum over the disc. And I was fascinated by it. And the first word he spelled out to me was love. And then he would say how much he loved me. And I mean, I couldn't believe what was happening before my eyes. It was a miracle. To this day, I feel it's a miracle. And so it moved so precisely. And so after I left that retreat, I told Sally, and she has since transitioned. My window of meeting her was just a couple of years. She transitioned 2 years after I met her. And I promised her, I said, I am going to practice this every day. And I did. For 2 years, I practiced pendulum communication with Mikey every day. And then from that, I practiced telepathically with him. So I would be driving to work. That seems to be the best time where I was almost like an automatic pilot going to work, and I would ask him questions out loud and listen to what he would say to me telepathically. And then I'd come home and ask him the same question and have him confirm it with the pendulum. And I actually really improved my skill that way in my communication. When I went to Scottsdale, Arizona for that Afterlife conference, and when I met Craig and Roberta Grimes, she asked me, you know, what brought you here? And I said, well, I have this crazy story and I don't know what to do with it. I said, my son passed. At that point, I think he had passed maybe 2 or 3 years. At that point, he was gone from the planet. And I said, I have this ability and I don't know what to think. And she goes, really? She was very skeptical about it. And she says, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I use a pendulum. And she said, you know, she questioned it. And she said, I'd like to see you do it. And I said, sure. So she came up to my room, and there were some other moms there with me as well. And I think I surprised her with this. So from there, she asked me if I would be on her Afterlife forums, which is afterlifeforums.com. And it's a place where people from all over the world could ask Mikey questions, and I would answer them. You know, I would type out the answers on the forum from what I heard from him. So I did that, and it was scary for me because the information, the questions I was asked, half of them I didn't even really understand. I didn't understand energy, consciousness, energy, or anything spiritual about afterlife stuff. I only thought, you know, heaven was in the clouds, and, you know, and it was, my whole thought, you know, that God was a man, and my whole perception of all of this changed significantly with what Mikey was telling me. And so my answers were truly Mikey. I had no idea if it was right or wrong, but I typed out the answers, and I answered thousands and thousands of questions, I feel like, since I've been doing it. And from there, I had people tell me, you know, you should write a book. You need to write a book about this and all the stuff that he tells you. And so I didn't know how to write a book. And his dad and Joey are like, Mom, you got to do this. You got to write this book. And so Roberta helped me. His voice, it's in first person. It, you know, I did it with the pendulum communication, with also telepathically. The description in the book of the afterlife, where he goes into specifics about the afterlife and where he resides, I literally did that pretty much letter for letter, word for word, because I didn't want to make a mistake. And we went over it a couple of times. So that particular chapter took me a long time to do, but I wanted to be sure it was accurate and truly of him. And so what I've learned from him is that everything is energy. Absolutely everything is energy. And he talks about how the simple way he describes things is, you think of a TV set. Your TV set is in one place. Okay, it's one place. Every time you change the channel, which is changing the frequency, so you get a different station, you see and experience something different on the TV. And he says that is the simplest way he can explain what all the infinite dimensions are that exist in the afterlife. That it is literally frequencies and the vibration of that dimension, and then that's what you will experience. And everything is energy. He talks about God, that God is love. God is a unity of absolute pure love, which is infinite. God is far beyond a man sitting in a chair, telling people what direction they're going. He says there's no eternal damnation, that we all have the ability to improve ourselves. And so the things that I learned through my Catholic upbringing was totally different than what Mikey was telling me. So it was a little scary for me as far as, telling some of my friends what I was hearing. I mean, some of them thought what I was doing, they said I was talking to Satan, who was impersonating himself as Mikey. And I said, well, if this is Satan, then Satan has turned into a very loving, happy, wonderful person, because it's all about love and how we're supposed to be kind to one another. And that's why we come here, for spiritual growth, because the more positive and loving we are, the higher we can increase our vibration. And so, I mean, I just have kept going with this, and it's amazing how people who had ridiculed about it, thinking what I was doing was a bad thing, now they see, the message is so important right now. I mean, with how the world is today, how it's to be positive and just kind in our ways with everyday life things, how important it is for us on a spiritual level. And it has helped me so much to let people know that just to be good, just to try to be kind, and how great the world would be if everybody was just nice. That's all, how great it would be. And Mikey talks about, our intent of our actions is what is so important. Sometimes we can make a mistake and hurt somebody's feelings and we don't even know it. So it's really about intent. And he says the higher our vibration, how we progress ourselves spiritually, the more elaborate our reality is when we transition. And yes, we will see our loved ones again. And yes, they are very close. And I think for anybody who has lost a loved one, anybody who's bereaved, that they hear you. That's one of the things I really want to get across today, is talk to your loved ones. They hear you. They come to events. Don't think for 1 minute that those loving connections are gone, because they're not. And they reach out to us in simple ways. And signs can be as simple as how they would maneuver a butterfly or a dragonfly. Listen to music. I mean, Mikey continues to use music. They can talk to you through songs, and there's so many important messages in music. And it's really important for us as grieving parents or of a loved one in general, to not blame others and to forgive. I can't stress that enough either. I think blame and lack of forgiving is a very negative emotion. It takes a lot of energy with that, and you're bringing in a lower vibration. And with that, it's harder for your loved ones to reach you. So I do think it's really important to try to stay positive, talk to your loved ones, and listen. Don't think it's your imagination. I believe we all have some ability to have a connection, and it can be simple or more complex, but it's our spiritual right, I think, that we are a unity, and those connections never end. And just because we're in the physical right now on a life journey doesn't mean that has to stop. So you want to tap into that. Very, very important. So the book that I wrote, or that Mikey wrote, this is the cover. I don't know if you can see that. It's Flying High in Spirit, and it is on Amazon. It's on it's paperback, audio, and Kindle version. So that's it. Of course, there's a snowboarder on there because that was his big thing. He had to have that on the cover. He insisted on that. And so, but that's a very brief introduction of my story. I'm on afterlifeforums.com still, but I will not give up on Mikey's message. I mean, he is all about love and kindness. He pushed the song Love Generation. The whole time he was being a DJ, that was his signature song. Listen to the lyrics of that song by Bob Sinclair. It's amazing what he was doing while he was here. He was very well loved here. He was an outgoing kid, and he tried hard to get a very important message across before he left the planet. And now I'm trying to continue to help him as well on this side. Thank you.